Welcome to this episode of Motherhood Goddess Powered with me, your host, Kim Garden. Today, I am so excited to be joined by the beautiful Laura Dempsey. Laura is a conscious parenting and teen empowerment practitioner who is a co-author on this amazing book, The Motherhood Goddess Powered. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about your chapter?
Yeah, so I read it back this morning actually because I was like, oh no, what did I write? I couldn't even remember because I've written so many different pieces. And I was like, wow, it really captured what I've experienced in motherhood. And, even some things that I left out in the chapter, but really feeling completely lost as a mother, really not enjoying parenting. That was the biggest thing for me. It was, I don't even know how to say challenging is not even the word, because so much happens and like we lose a piece of ourselves and it's so demanding, and then all the pressures, and so then the guilt of not wanting to parent. And so and then having, even when I read it, I said, I was talking about having my first child and how difficult it was. And then I said, and so I went on to have two more. And I was like, what the heck was I thinking? And I thought I should have added in there that it's very interesting. I went on to have my two kids again because I come from a family, I had two siblings. And so I just did what I thought. I just envisioned having more than one child. And so I just did it. I didn't listen inside. So that's basically talking about the chapter and then my journey into being a more conscious parent.
Well, I have to say, reading that first part of your chapter was, as a mother, it was so raw, like it was so honest. I was just like, thank you. Thank you for hearing the words of how I've felt before. And then again, you put that guilt on yourself, but hearing you be so honest and so so honest about it was just, it made me feel good as the reader. Like, and how did it feel for you being able to open up like that?
I've always been really open about my journey with parenting because as much guilt as I have, I know that I'm not the only one that feels this way. And I think it is better to express yourself. And interestingly enough, I could express myself about it, but never ask for the help that I needed or take the time that I needed. So there was a disconnect there between, expressing what was going on and meeting my own needs or asking for support. So, but yeah, writing it is, I feel good about it because then I want other moms to know, like I literally would Google, I don't want to be a parent anymore. Like, what do you do? And I know at that time, my therapist at that time said, well, you have a choice. And I thought, no, I don't have a choice. And she said, well, let's look at it. And it was just really seeing that, of course, I wouldn't choose not to parent my kids because I love them and I feel like I'm the best mom for them. So even that alone, and switching that wording from I have to be a parent to I choose to be a parent, made a big difference in moving forward. But I still definitely struggled even up to this year, to the beginning of this year, before things really started to shift, but literally triggered constantly by my children.
Mm-hmm. Having known you for so many years and seeing the change that has happened in the last year, it's amazing to watch. And hearing you talk about conscious parenting, can you explain that a little bit more? Because at the time I didn't quite understand it, but you've taught me quite a bit. So maybe you could explain to everybody what exactly conscious parenting is.
Yeah, so what it is essentially, and so what we do as parents is we go and look for the books or the training or the different things to help deal with our children, to help manage our children, to help modify their behavior. And I guess there is some place for those different techniques that are learned, that are taught, but it's from the old paradigm of being unconscious and bringing in our own fears, our own beliefs, our own baggage, and imposing them upon our children. And then we parent unconsciously because we're so blinded by all of our crap that we only like that we have all this fear. So for instance, if the teenager doesn't study and we get into this big upset about the kid not studying, it's normally because there's an underlying fear in ourselves that's not necessarily true. It's from a past experience and we're predicting the future. And so if you break that back down, well, what happens if the child doesn't study? Okay, well, then they're going to fail the test. What happens if they fail the test? They're going to fail high school. What if they fail high school? They're going to have no job. What if they have no job? They're going to be homeless. It goes down to that. So it's a deep rooted fear that's coming out in the way that we're parenting, and it's very unconscious because that fear is not true. So conscious parenting is actually really looking at yourself and identifying those fears, identifying when you're being triggered by your children, because that's our greatest teacher. Because then we can peel back when we're triggered, what the pattern is, what the upset was, what the expectation was it realistic or not? And often when we can do that work and spot it, then we're less likely to be triggered or as frequently in the future. So I know as I've been practicing and observing myself, not judging myself, just observing how I'm being triggered by my children, I can see that it's not actually them. It's something within inside of myself from my childhood and my unmet needs that's showing up. It's the need to control them, to keep them safe.
Yes.
To make sure they're happy.
So what would you suggest for somebody who is like, because this sounds amazing. Yes, a lot of it is about that control, and then it's all about us. But what would you suggest to someone who is new to, or is just starting to get interested in conscious parenting? What would you suggest they could do for themselves to start this way of parenting?
The first thing that we can start doing is just observing the triggers. So we often snap or get frustrated or start to have an inner dialogue about certain situations that spiral. And so however that shows up for the person, just really observing it and even writing it down, because then later when they have an opportunity, they can start to break that down and look at why they were triggered. And there's so many tools and techniques I can't that can be used, right, to become more connected to the self. But that would be a first step, is at least identifying the triggers and just seeing the triggers and then not beating yourself up about them. And then there's so much more in like journaling. And then I'm going to there's some techniques in the book as well. But for beginners, I think that's the place to start.
Absolutely. So what would you say to a parent who wants to try this conscious technique, but there has to be a willingness to look at themselves as well? And how would you encourage them to start this style of parenting?
Well, I think it's more education. And then they can arrive at their own idea whether they want to do that or if they want to explore it or not. I think that the motivation comes from having a deeper connection with your children ultimately, and a deeper connection with yourself. And when you do this work, things just flow, because we are, like, I would educate them about how we are all energy and how it's a vibrational thing. And like, even my husband would say when the kids were babies and I'd be stressed out, the baby crying, and what's wrong with the baby? And he'd say, well, you're so stressed out, like they're going to know you're stressed out. And I'd be like, what? Like, whatever. What does he know? And
Yeah.
but now I can see it. And the younger they are, the more conscious they are. Like they are fully aligned. They can fully feel what we're feeling.
Mhm.
And so the amazing thing about conscious parenting is that they vibrationally will align with us. So as we heal and as we're not triggered, and once that veil is gone, we can fully see the child, and all they want and all we've ever wanted is to be fully loved and accepted. And
Mhm.
so we put on masks. Our kids do it. We did it. We start acting and doing things and behaving in ways to get approval. And it's not our authentic self. So when you start to see yourself, accept yourself, love yourself, not judge yourself, you do the same for your kids. And then they're fully seen and they're fully accepted and they can show up in a safe space authentically. So naturally, a deeper connection happens, and that deeper connection with self. They're going to model what you do and how you treat yourself. So that's the motivation to me.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Winner right there. So with your own kids experience, you talked a little bit about in the book about a moment with your daughter and being able to really look at her. Do you want to maybe tell, not without going into too much detail, but tell a little bit about how you're noticing the changes, how you're working with your own children and the changes that you're seeing
Mhm.
from your own
Well,
experience?
yeah. So first of all, a lot of like there's the how we're triggered by our children, but also looking at their behaviors. So I shared a story about my daughter when she was 6 and how she was beating herself up and she was running and she was overwhelmed and she was having a really hard time at school and having outbursts. And it was me trying to think, okay, how can I support her when I'm not there?
Mhm.
And it was just interesting that I was experiencing the exact same thing. So that's just another example of how our children are showing us the lessons that we haven't learned. And I think as I see them fully and then support them and do my own work, that's when they just naturally become more in tune with their selves and their own intuition and knowing what they need and being able to identify what's coming up in their bodies. So I think that answered your question. um
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then
yeah.
you're building these empowered young women who are
Mhm.
going to be able to articulate their feelings and not be triggered by the things. I have to say the last sentence of your chapter talking about lineage and stuff was amazing. Can you just elaborate for those who don't understand how our emotions are like, or how the traumas that we've gone through can sometimes carry out through lineage? Can you elaborate on
Uh-huh.
that?
Yeah. So a lot of my background in my teaching is through metaphysics. So I learn about epigenetics and quantum physics and neuroplasticity and universal law. So we learn about how we actually inherit things through DNA. So through our lineage, our actual cells carry the DNA of trauma, and they carry the unconscious ways we've been parenting or parented, and the all the good and all the bad that's been experienced in humankind is passed down through the DNA.
Mhm.
And then through, as a spiritual practitioner, we learn new thought, and new thought recognizes that we are all one. So if I heal, everything in this universe heals. That is universal law. And so that's why when I talked about educating people when they're not really sure or just starting, it's really the foundation in learning these teachings that it makes sense why becoming more conscious as a parent works. And so there's a lot to it. It's so exciting. There's so much to know about that. And
Yeah.
I think the good news is that even though we inherit all these things through DNA, through epigenetics, we can change our DNA.
Mhm. And it's
Yeah.
fascinating, I find, to learn about yourself
Mhm.
as the mother, not just for, the conscious parenting for the kids, but as the mother to go through and learn about yourself, um, on such a soul level. It's fascinating. I have to say. That's amazing. So is there a key message that you'd want to share with all mothers?
I just say honestly that there's never anything you could do wrong to, quote unquote, F up your kids. That you don't need to judge yourself. You don't need to fix anything because it's done. And in this space, there's no space, no time. And just to be in the present moment and just to fully let down the veil and look and show up in your life in all circumstances from a very neutral place, a non-judgmental place, and just open your heart and just try to see the beauty in parenting in all life. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. It's like, yes, I'll take that, please.
Yeah.
So if anyone wanted to reach out to you and get a hold of you, what's the best way to connect with you?
So on Facebook, it's Laura Dempsey. And then my website is truetransformativehealing.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura. This has been so informative, and I could listen to you speak all day. Like I love listening to you talk. So thank you so much for taking.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much.
Take care.